Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Update Extra video, giving you extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. Let's go first to our good friend Yevgeny Prigozhin. And when I say good friend, I mean armed psychopath who I detest. So, although he has some pretty valid criticisms of our other good friend, Vladimir Putin. And when I say good friend, I mean the psychopathic dictator whom I detest. Right, okay. So what's happened? Well, this is really worthy of the news piece tomorrow, but there's a few things about Prigozhin I'd like to discuss. Putin met with Wagner leader just days after the rebellion. So this is hot off the presses. Associated Press reports that Putin has met with Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner leader, just days after a short-lived rebellion by the mercenary chief and his private army. According to the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, a 3-hour meeting took place on the 29th of June, which also involved commanders from the military company Prigozhin founded. Prigozhin has a long-standing conflict with Russia's top military brass, which on the 24th of June culminated in an armed mutiny in which he led his fighters into Russia. The Wagner Group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin will move to Belarus under a deal to end the armed mutiny he led against Russia's military leadership, the Kremlin said on a Saturday night. The deal was brokered by the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Kremlin spokesperson Peskov said Lukashenko had offered to mediate with Vladimir Putin's agreement because he had known Prigozhin personally for about 20 years. Peskov said the criminal case that had been opened against Prigozhin for armed mutiny would be dropped, and that the Wagner fighters who had taken part in the March for Justice, scare quotes, would not face any action in recognition of their previous service to Russia. Although Putin had earlier vowed to punish those who participated in the mutiny, Peskov said the agreement had the higher goal of avoiding confrontation and bloodshed. Prigozhin and all his fighters vacated the military headquarters in the southern city of Rostov-on-Don, and they had previously taken over. The RA news agency reported. Right, why this is weird is, I mean, the whole thing's weird. Putin met with Prigozhin. I would love to have been a fly on that wall. I guess these guys have got a relationship anyway, and there would have been some deal of explaining exactly what he wanted. I've said before that Putin lives in his own bubble, his own information bubble, where he can't verify claims that and information that is being given to him because he doesn't use the internet, doesn't have a smartphone, thinks the internet is a tool of the CIA. He's really paranoid. So all information is given to him by people, but then he can't confirm that or disconfirm that information because he then has to go back to the people who have given that information or to other people who will still be curating information and filtering it. So he's got no independent way of verifying basically anything. So he really doesn't know what's going on. We know that the mill bloggers that met with Putin after a big sort of press conference meeting where that was in the open, these mill bloggers like War Gonzo, RIP, and these others met Putin, had a chat, and then they had a half an hour meeting behind closed doors where apparently they told Putin things that Putin had no idea about, which kind of confirms this sense that Putin really doesn't know what's going on. He just doesn't know what's going on the front line, and everything is curated by the MOD. So there could be this case where Prigozhin then comes to Putin and actually lets him know exactly what's going on and gives him a dose of reality. But still, we've got this situation, and Steve Rosenberg, the BBC's Steve Rosenberg, who's doing some excellent work actually during the war, says, story so far, there was a mutiny, but it was over in a day. But Russian Air Force pilots were killed, but no one was arrested. But the Kremlin denounced the mutineers as traitors. But 5 days later, Prigozhin and Wagner commanders were in the Kremlin talking to Putin. All clear? And as Sergei Radchenko here says, let's blame it all on Surovikin and be done with it. So this is the weird part, is that you've got people who have killed highly qualified and experienced Russian pilots and taken down 6 or 7 Russian airframes, giving the VKS, the Russian Air Force, one of its worst days, in living memory. And the only person that appears to be done for this is Surovikin, who is a general who was kind of allied to Prigozhin, who came out and gave that speech to say, "Oh, you need to stop this, Prigozhin." But there was all the rumors that that was done under duress. He had already been arrested. He's still not been seen, and this is some time after that mutiny. So of all the people, he is like the ultimate fall guy. And the irony is, and I guess this is good for for Ukraine is that actually he was the one general who seemed to be fairly effective and competent. And by competent, I don't mean morally decent. I mean it was horrible. He's the butcher of Syria, but he, yeah, he competently withdrew Russian forces from Kherson, created the Surovikin lines, these defensive trenches, which have now been built upon, so on and so forth. He did a fairly good job at being remotely competent, something that no other Russian generals seem to have been. And he's the one that's taken the fall for the whole mutiny. It's just so bizarre, isn't it? Still don't know what the arrangement is, what's going to happen with Prigozhin and the Wagner mutineers, the Wagner troops and commanders, but they seem to have got off scot-free, and Surovikin hasn't. Now, staying with Prigozhin, a framed document apparently photographed in Yevgeny Prigozhin's house sets out what appears to be Wagner's group's founding constitution. It's signed by Prigozhin, who's referred to as the director, and Dmitry Utkin, Wagner's founder, known as the commander. In fact, it's probably a good time to look into Dmitry Utkin. So we go to the Wikipedia page. According to several news outlets, Utkin is an Amara of Nazi Germany and has multiple Nazi tattoos, including Schutzstaffel, SS insignia. Utkin reportedly called himself Wagner after German composer Richard Wagner because his work was greatly admired by Adolf Hitler and was appropriated by the Nazis. Members of the Wagner group have said that Utkin is a Rodnover, a believer in a Slavic native faith. He has not made any public appearances since 2016. He was a former Russian army officer, special forces officer, holding the rank of lieutenant colonel, and was reported to have founded the Wagner group with Prigozhin, and his own call sign is reportedly Wagner. He has received 4 orders of courage of Russia. Now, I mean, your man here is basically a Nazi. So, like, what really gets me is when pro-Russian shills say, or pro-Kremlin shills say, "Oh, we're denazifying Ukraine and the Ukraine Nazis." It's like, one of your main guys doing this is just an overt Nazi. Just, he has Nazi tattoos on his chest and shoulders. I mean, he is a Nazi. There you go. He is fascist. So don't give me that. There's ideas that he's been. I'm fairly sure I've seen him standing in front of a swastika as well somewhere. I'm pretty sure, but I have to. Is that him? Is that Dmitry Utkin? Might not be, but yeah, you got. Yeah, he's not a nice guy, I would imagine. But there you go. So, right, let's go through this because I think it gives you a really good sense of actually Prigozhin more than Utkin here. So a framed document apparently photographed in Yevgeny Prigozhin's house sets out what appears to be the Wagner Group's founding constitution. It's signed by Prigozhin, who's referred to as the director, and Dmitry Utkin, Wagner's founder, or the commander. So the document signed on 1st of May 2014 commits the two to following an agreed set of rules due to the difficult situation in Ukraine and the need to protect the Donbass, the heart of Russia. The rules in question are as follows. These are the director's rules. So these are for Prigozhin. 1. Provide weapons. 2. Provide funding. 3. Provide guarantees for the killed and wounded. 4. Provide permanent work. 5. Provide protection from the article for mercenarism, Article 359 of the Criminal Code, because being a mercenary is illegal. So it's Prigozhin's job to protect those from being seen as illegal. 6. Resolving all issues collegially. 7. To take part in person. It's interesting. We have seen Prigozhin on the front lines with his soldiers, very often going there, speaking with them, seeing how they are, going to quite dangerous places for him. If the Ukrainians knew he'd be there, he'd be target number 1. So he does actually follow these orders, it seems, these agreements. 8. Do not go against the Russian people. There's a 9th rule written in handwriting, but it's unclear. It says Chris Owicki. You can't work out what that says. And then it goes on to Utkin's duties, the commander's duties. 1, select the team. 2, train the men. 3, get rid of deserters. 4, prohibition, alcohol, drugs. 5, resolve issues collegially. 6, make full use of gained knowledge and experience. Complete tasks to the end. 7, do not go against VP, presumably Vladimirovich Putin. 8, do not lie or deceive. Always tell it like it is. This, I think, is also reflective of what Prigozhin's like. So he's demanding that Utkin doesn't lie to him about what's going on. That is what Prigozhin's like. So say what you like about him as a person, his criticisms of the MOD are usually, or have been, on point. So he doesn't lie to himself, I don't think. I've said before, he's something of a realist. And I think his expectations for those below him are that, because he doesn't want to be like Putin, which is sitting in his information bubble, getting deceived. And that means you can't make good decisions. Like, if he wants to operate as effectively as possible, knowledge is power, knowledge is key. And being lied to is just never going to work. So I think that's a really interesting insight to Wagner, to Prigozhin, and of course to Utkin, Dmitry Utkin. And do you know what? Russian voices, just, you look at someone like Utkin and you think, dude, you're on the wrong side. Anyway, continuing with Prigozhin, War Gonzo, War Gonzo. War Gonzo, Russian mill blogger, famous for his ginger hair and ginger beard. I don't say that as I'm not discriminating against him, because I have ginger hair and a beard, or at least I did before I got too old. But he was famous for that, had a cap, this big ginger beard, and when he was met with Putin in that meeting where they told Putin what for, he was dressed in a cap, so people were wondering whether that was appropriate and whatnot. But he goes to him from the front line quite often and goes to trenches, and he sort of reports from there and helps out and whatnot. He apparently was shot in a trench recently. There's video of someone with ginger hair and big ginger beard, with elements of his attire that seem to be War Gonzo's. All the information points to him dying. Now, he is still posting on War Gonzo's Telegram channel, reporting from on the war, but that's probably his team. It's almost certainly not him. I put money on him not being alive, and the reason I'm talking about this is because people do keep asking me about this. There is no evidence still of any timestamp video or imagery of him being alive, so I think he probably is dead. But as I say, War Gonzo is still reporting as an outfit. But you get so many memes, like this is Prigozhin in one of his wigs, because he's got loads of disguises that were found, and then all these selfies are found on his PC. There's, I am War Gonzo, Spartacus. I am War Gonzo. I am War Gonzo. Prigozhin. I am War Gonzo. But yeah, so there's still plenty of memes going around about War Gonzo's non-existence. Right, I think this is important. It tells us something, doesn't it? Well, you don't know yet because you don't know what I'm going to say. But this is going to tell me about cluster munitions. So here we have a drone going over and dropping something that looks like a hand grenade, which is going to be some kind of equivalent explosive to a cluster munition explosive. If you get these ones that have, say, 72 of those and they litter them around a field, this is how they explode. And if it's next to a mine, it's going to trigger a mine. So I don't think there's any doubt. So there are these different views about whether cluster munitions can clear minefields, and I think they can be somewhat useful, but probably not perfect, which then presents a problem of then you still have to go and put a mine roller or mine plow over the field anyway. But I think that they will be able to blow up mines. You can see that. I think you should be able to infer that from this. But you are not going to have mines that are next to each other like this. These are the standard Russian tank mines, anti-tank mines, but they're going to be littered around a field. And if you're going to throw some cluster munitions at the field, then there will be cluster munitions that fall between mines and might not definitely blow them up. And so I think that's the issue with using cluster munitions. I don't think you have an issue with the principle of them triggering a mine. I think they can do that, but they'll have to be right next to them. That's the issue. Anyway, mentioned NEFO this morning, North American Fellow Organization, helping out the Ukrainians with fundraising, but also information warfare against the Russian propagandists. They've done an amazing job, but I don't talk about them enough, and I think I take them for granted. So here, Borg Fellow, who's a great supporter of the channel, yeah, finally you talk about NAFO in your video. Thank you so much for that. So he is right. I haven't talked about them enough, and that's probably because they do such consistent good work and they're all over the internet all the time that I just take them for granted. They're just doing their stuff, and it's great. But I probably should talk about them more. So I've asked him to get me an article or some kind of source material that gives a good synopsis of the work they have done. Right, moving on to something else. Heavy tanks T10 and IS-3s are already being deconserved by the enemy. So these are being buffed up with a bit of T-cut and sent to the front line, it appears. So these are really old tanks. So the IS-3 is a heavy tank from 1944. The T10 is a heavy tank from 1953, designed in the late 40s though, and no longer in service. Retired by the Russians in 1996 and withdrawn from South Ossetia in 1995, although it still says to present. Sources vary, though. That is going to be, I mean, these things can hurt you if a piece of lead can land on your head shot from their barrels, of course. But what does it say about the Russians if they are having to resort to this? The desperate states require, desperate measures. Satellite images had spread on the internet which seem to prove that the enemy has begun deconserving T10 and IS-3 heavy tanks, as we managed to find out by comparing this satellite image with the image of the monument on which the Sprut SD Airborne Forces Sprut is installed. What exactly these machines were actually retrieved from storage. A bit of mixed up translation there, but you get the point that this source has come to the conclusion that yes, they are moving these tanks presumably to upgrade them or to buff them up and get them to the front line. Lots of people talking about this, saying surely it's a joke, right? And other people saying actually, these can still cause you a bit of damage, but then saying they've got really light armor that won't last long on the battlefield, and other people saying, well, actually self-propelled guns don't have very heavy armor because they're used much further back. And the idea would be that these would use, although they wouldn't have very good elevation on their barrels, they'd probably be used just as artillery, as basically indirect fire. So yeah, the range won't be great, but I don't know what else you could really use them for. But it's just wow, they are appearing to get these 70-year-old tanks out of storage. It's incredible. Right, this is a Chris Wiki thread that I sort of shared with you. I'm going to go into more detail with it today. Members of a Russian penal unit who say they have lost 73% of their unit fighting in Ukraine and lack food, water, and ammo have now been disarmed completely and dumped in an abandoned building. Their relatives say they are defenseless and waiting to be slaughtered. The men who are serving in the Storm Z penal unit recorded a video on 28th of June 2023 saying that they were refusing to follow, quote, terrible orders after losing 110 out of 150 men on the front line. They had no ammunition, no food or water. So it appears that the men have now been relocated to a real location in the occupied Zaporizhia region, in the village of Rozivka. They say in a new video dated 29th of June that after their refusal, they were taken to a broken two-story building and dumped there without weapons. Quote, we have been completely disarmed. They brought us here to some building, took away bulletproof vests, helmets, machine guns, grenades. What did we have? In principle, we do not refuse to fight. So remember, these guys aren't refusing to fight. They're still fighting. They just want to fight with decent equipment and decent orders. But we are not satisfied with the fact that we have been on the front line for a third month without pay. The men say their relatives have no record of them serving in the special military operation, and they are officially listed as simply missing. And it's like we don't know what to do. What will happen to us next? Asked one man. They're still willing to fight. So this is the key. We are ready to go to hell. We are ready to catch this Zelensky. We are ready to fight and defend our country. What? You're in Zaporizhia. What do you mean defend your country? You're literally invading another country. Oh, do you know what? I'm British. I'm going to go and defend the UK by attacking France. Yeah, damn you, you're French. Let's have Agincourt 2.0. Like, that's not defending, that's attacking. you're locked in a room without food and water and ammunition, and you still want to fight for Russia. Glory to Russia. Yay, great, Russia, great. We love being sent to our deaths, and if we're not sent to our deaths, locked in a room. Gee whiz. But we have our families, and we are people. Do you know who has families as well? The people you're trying to kill. And do you know where those families live and those people live? In the country you're trying to invade. Quote, we need to be paid a salary for 3 months so that they give us proof, certificates that we are members of the SMO, that out of 150 people, 40 survived in this building, completely disarmed. That's the whole truth. And they end with, glory to Russia. Yeah, glory. According to one relative, quote, they are sitting alone. There is no guard. If the Ukrainians come, they have nothing to even fight back with. They were just left there to be slaughtered. Left there by who? By whom? Russians. I'll tell you what, if you've got a problem, go and complain to Putin. He's got corporate responsibility of what's going on here. I'll tell you what, don't be such fans of Putin. Don't be shouting glory to Russia. This ain't glorious. It's disgusting. Every element of the Russian performance here is disgusting. A, being there. B, doing all the things you're doing there. C, treating your own troops in that way. It's all wrong. So if you have an issue, I suggest you look inwards. Right. Mick Ryan here has a good thread on Ukrainian adaptation here. He's referring to Oliver Carroll's article in The Economist that I shared with you this morning about sappers working to clear mines with, their own, as individual kind of humans walking through a field with metal detectors and whatnot. So an interesting report on Ukrainian tactical adaptation from Oliver Carroll on the operations by the Ukrainian armed forces to breach the Surovikin line. While it is uncertain how widespread this adaptation is, this is Mick Ryan, by the way, he's a retired Australian general, very good, follow on Twitter. The Ukrainian tactical activities to conduct obstacle breaches appear to have assumed a lower signature to increase survivability and effectiveness. While breaching under armour, using special vehicles like the ones seen there, based on a tank chassis, is a favoured method by Western military institutions. These platforms have easily detectable signatures for ground and aerial forces. As we saw the attack from Malatok Machka, a number of mine vehicles were taken out. Also, basic defensive doctrine for the most armies emphasises targeting of combat engineers before and during their conduct of mobility, supporting to an army during their offensive operations. Given minefields are generally covered by observation and fire, this clearance task can be extraordinarily lethal, even for the best armies, especially if they lack air cover, which the Ukrainians do. So it's really difficult to use these. I mean, if you want to clear the minefields so that your attack vehicles can drive over the minefields, you need to be the first there. And if you're the first there, you're the first vehicle that everyone can see. You're the most likely vehicle to be seen. And do you have really good armor? Do you have not necessarily. Can you protect yourself? No, you need other vehicles to do that. You're just basically a sitting target waiting to get hammered. It's a really challenging thing. Given minefields are generally covered by observation and fire, this clearance task can be extraordinarily lethal. So just to repeat that, even for the best armies, especially if they lack air cover. Therefore, Ukrainian sappers are adapting to lower their signature by undertaking dismounted mine clearance operations. Using these infiltration tactics, they are also seeking to enhance their survivability by dispersing more and potentially achieve surprise. Dispersal is a tried and true response to increasing lethality on the battlefield since the beginning of the First Industrial Revolution. It is a key method to enhance one's survivability. Deploy graphs this lethality versus dispersal gradient in the evolution of weapons and warfare. The trade-off, however, is that breach activities are slower, exposing sappers and other elements of the breach and assault forces to enemy direct and indirect fires. As such, the need for friendly fires, including high explosives, obscurants, and electronic warfare, is increased. Such is a brutal calculus that battlefield leaders must face in operations and wars of this type. There are often few good options in such a situation. All choices are relative. It remains to be seen how widespread this tactical adaptation is across the different Ukrainian axes of advance. But as they have demonstrated throughout this war, the Ukrainian military is sure to be learning and adapting in order to defeat the Russian army. So thank you very much, Mick Ryan. Really good synopsis there. And finally, we come on to the last thing to share with you today. Thank you for your company. Here is the problematic. This is a position statement of the Russian Air Forces airliners. Here is it Rossiya? What's the Russian Airlines, St. Petersburg flight on Rossiya Airlines. So we have a screw that is trying to escape. That wouldn't fill me with a great deal of confidence videoing that from out the window. Goodness me. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. I really appreciate all your support. You are all phenomenally generous with your time and efforts in the threads of all the videos. Such wonderful commenting. Thank you. Take care. Speak soon.